So this video feels long-awaited somehow, even for me. I really enjoy talking about the Espada, and I have talked a lot about them as I've read and watched the Arrancar arc. It seems like forever ago that I was first introduced to Ukiura and Yami and then Grimmjow and then the whole conference table, steadily learning about who each of these characters are. There's been a lot to talk about with them, but that's mostly because they are an incredibly interesting and versatile group of antagonists, and I loved their presence throughout this whole story arc. I love a good group of villains, especially when they are all pretty distinctive and have their own interpersonal connections. If you want to see my initial reactions to these characters and the genesis of these opinions I'm about to share, you can watch my videos to see it all and follow the breadcrumbs to see how this list has now ended up the way that it has. I've talked a lot about their roles in the story, their developments, their fights, my mostly incorrect guesses of their numbers, or even my wife deciding which ones are hot or not. They've given me so many thoughts, laughs, jeers, cheers, and even some tears. So like I have with other groups in the series, I figured that I should finally provide you with my personal ranking of the Espada members. To be clear, I am including 2 former Espada as well, but after some consideration, I have decided that I am not including the Privarone Espada. It might be because I just don't view them in the same category because they really just felt like their own little thing. They never are shown interacting with the current Espada or having any real bearing on their stories, so I just look at them separately, that's all. Feel free to disagree, but that's just my perspective on them. I just wanted to make that clear right off the bat, so just be aware of that. If you're a fan of those 3, I'm sorry to leave them out, but Dordoni is too majestic for any ranking video to contain. He would have taken up every single spot and more. It just wouldn't have been fair. So Dordoni's out, the other 2 are out. So with that said, we will be looking at 12 characters total here. Remember, this is not a ranking based on power or anything like that. This is my own personal ranking of my own feelings toward these characters. If you get the urge to go to war for your favorite in the comments, I get it. I will understand, but just remember, this is all just my own personal thoughts. Feel free to share your list below. So anyway, let's get into it. In last place, I have Loopy. Do I need to elaborate? Not really, but I will. This should surprise no one. My disdain for Loopy is well documented, to say the least. There's a reason he's not gonna be on the thumbnail for this video. It's because he's awful and I didn't enjoy his presence at all, so I was very glad he was so short-lived. Grimmjow taking him out was one of my happiest moments in the series, maybe. I almost didn't even include him, but he's the only one in the current story that's an Espada that honestly deserves to be called the absolute worst among them. Awful character. I don't miss him, and I never will. Really only brought me any joy in his final moments, so that should tell you everything you need to know. Good riddance. I never want to have to think about you again, Loopy. Last place, easily, not even close. If you were looking at the list, it would be Loopy in last, and then a huge gap, and then the next place, which is 11th, which I have Zamari. Listen, Zamari is a classic case of being underdeveloped and being a bit boring. Of all of the Espada, maybe even Loopy, it's the hardest to pin down anything really concrete for Zamari personality-wise. He's calm, he doesn't like to be called arrogant, and he's a zealot for Aizen. That's about it. However, I really enjoyed his initial design. He looked mysterious as hell, but that is almost completely counteracted by how much I don't like his resurrection look. And with how little we actually saw of Zamari, it's like half and half. Half the time we saw him, he's in the resurrection look. That whole design just felt counterintuitive compared to what little we actually knew about him, and it wasn't surprising in like a fun way. The design just came off as goofy, and in the end, he was just kind of a letdown. His fight with Byakuya didn't really make him all that intimidating. interesting or memorable, but at least it gave Byakuya a few good moments, I guess. I really wish Zamari was given more, or at least was more interesting in the short time he was around. A couple of Espada also weren't around that long, but made much more of an impression on me. Zamari was just very, very forgettable. And sometimes being bland and uninteresting is the worst thing a character can be. Bonsai, Zamari. Bonsai. At number 10, I have Yami. And number 10 is the number that he should have stuck with. I went back and forth on whether I'd put Yami over Zamari, honestly. What it came down to for me is that Zamari wasn't around long enough and didn't really do enough to really be defined as a character, while Yami, while mostly being just a big brute, was around probably too long. But at least he felt like a character, even if he was pretty one-dimensional and was utilized in a way that I didn't enjoy very much. It's no secret to anyone who watched my videos that I didn't like Yami being number 0 at all, and thought he definitely overstayed his welcome. He's this low because I just didn't like him much to begin with. He was okay as a big grunt, but the way he was eventually used was one of the first things in Bleach so far that really doesn't sit right with me. I just didn't see how the twist with him was a benefit to any part of the story or to his character, and I still don't. I hoped that Kubo would prove me wrong, but he hasn't. Still, Yami is serviceable as a big heavy henchman, and that Espada number 0 nonsense makes him pretty memorable in my mind, even if for the wrong reasons. In the end, I respect his archetype as the team's heavy, but I just wish he had been handled so much better. A fight with Chad while still being the number 10 would have been far more fitting than the nonsense that was thrust upon him for the sake of a plot device to keep some other characters occupied. We haven't gotten an update on that fight yet, but it's ridiculous that it's still happening at all while we're fighting Aizen. I doubt that he's going to do anything in this fight that will bump him up higher, but hey, maybe he'll surprise me in a good way next time. I just think he was underutilized when he should have been around, and overutilized when he shouldn't have still been around. A more interesting or entertaining personality might have helped, but he's just turned out to be a rage monster, and that's it. And that number 0 reveal did not help him look better in my eyes. Number 10. It's where he belongs. It's what he should have been. His number should never have changed on his shoulder. Number 10, Yami. You're number 10. At number 9, I have Haribel. Haribel is the first one on the list that I would say I actually like a lot. I wish I could put her higher, but unfortunately, this is where she's at. I really liked her designs, but I feel like she wasn't given as many highlight moments as some other Espada, unfortunately. She didn't show up much until the battle for Karakura Town, but even then, still didn't stand out remotely as much as Barragan and Stark, who also only really showed up around then. To the point where her backstory wasn't even in the manga, and the fight she had was much less interesting than theirs. That fight didn't even really get a proper conclusion, as Aizen decided to just put an end to it, which is a shame for her. I would have loved for Kubo to give her a bit more focus and to highlight her more, but he just didn't. She really didn't stand out as much as I hoped for. But I don't think there was any major negative to Haribel. She was fine, but I wanted the number 3 Espada to be more than fine, you know? Still, I liked her code of honor, I liked her relationship with her underlings. There's just something very Amazonian about them. I loved her shark aesthetic and her water powers, and I loved her look, especially when she had the mask, as brief as that was. But in the end, Haribel was just kinda okay for me. Mostly I just feel bad for her now. But yeah, unfortunately I couldn't put her higher. At number 8, ironically, Xyloporo. I always rock with a mad scientist, and he's no exception. So you may be wondering, why is he so low on the list if you like mad scientists so much? And my response is, because there really wasn't much to him beyond being a mad scientist. That was part of his charm, I guess, but it didn't endear me to him all that much in the end. And he wasn't intimidating and scary enough to kind of balance that out. Unfortunately for him, there's already a great mad scientist in Bleach. There's actually a few, but Xyloporo works best as a poor reflection of Mayuri. But so many of his best moments are kind of reliant on that juxtaposition. He was fittingly gross and evil and smart, which allowed for some horrifying things like his rebirth, or his voodoo dolls, or how he devoured his own underlings. All of that was great. Loved it. He was properly psychotic and hateable, one of the most conniving of the Espada. He also had easily one of the most disturbing endings for any character so far in the series. The whole sequence of his perception slowing down as he was killed was really haunting stuff that has stuck with me ever since I read it. Xyloporo is solid, but just definitely not my favorite of the group. When it comes to deranged mad scientists in Bleach, he just can't compare to Mayuri. And unfortunately, as an Espada member, he just can't compare to the people I put above him. At number 7, I have Neutra. I really struggled on where to place Neutra on this list, to be honest. Like, a lot. He's easily the one I had the most trouble with actually ranking. Because on the one hand, I think he's one of the more interesting characters in the group, personality-wise. There's a lot of kind of surprising, subtle layers to him beneath his very boastful, spiteful, horrible exterior. Personality-wise, he's one of the more cruel Espada, but it was always interesting how his hatred came from very obvious self-loathing and was just a lot of overcompensation. He could have just been vindictive and obnoxious, and he absolutely was those things, but he wasn't just that, you know? He's one of the most easy to hate because he's just a very gross person. His design was so strange from the moment I saw him, but it's truly this fantastic look that Kubo concocted. Like, what a memorable design. Years from now, when I think of the Espada, one of the first people I think of will definitely be Neutra, just for the design alone. The silhouette, incredible. Out of everyone's placement, I feel like Neutra might be the one where I look back and regret where he's at, but at this specific moment in time, right now, this is how I feel about him, and he's going to 7th place. Practically stuck in the middle like usual, wishing he was higher up. But for real, he was a great antagonist with a surprising amount of depth at times. Pathetic in a fascinating way. Yeah, that's how I'd describe Neutra. Pathetic in a fascinating way. I've got Aaron Yarrow at 6. I know this may surprise some people considering how early he was beaten and how little we actually saw of him. He might be a lot higher here than he is on a lot of lists, but I just really liked my guy Aaron as an antagonist, especially what he brought to the story and for Rukia as a character. And outside of how effective his tormenting nature was in the narrative, I just really vibed with his creepy aesthetic. He's one of the most unsettling Espada for sure, and his focus on mind games and deception really made him stand out. His fight wasn't just a battle of skill or power, but instead he forced Rukia to face her own past and push through her own grief that he tried to use against her. Not to mention his actual appearance is so weird and inventive. Like, a lot of the Espada are hollows that are looking more humanoid and more like people, and then there's this guy who's just 2 mini skulls floating around a vat on his shoulders. And then when he transforms, it's literally just the lower part of his body turns into a giant tentacled monster. So he's like I think I called him a Lovecraftian centaur or something. It's weird. It's just, he's so weird. I love it. I thought a lot of the lore behind him was also really interesting and wish it had been expanded on even more. The fact that he was a Gillian beforehand, the only Gillian in the Espada, and gained a lot of power by absorbing other hollows really stood out, not to mention his integration of Cayenne and what that meant. The whole ruse in the beginning, it was so interesting. Just everything about him, from his personality to his appearance, it was perfect for this kind of character. He was just extremely unique, and I would have loved to have seen more from him. Is he the most complex of the Espada? No. Is he a multi-layered character? Not really. But that's okay, because he's creepy, evil, and pretty great. He did a lot with what little he had. So number 6 for my guy, Aaron. Alright, here we are, the top 5. These were especially difficult because I really adore all of these characters for a variety of reasons. But I had to place them, so I did, Here we go. At number 5, I have Nell. I had to put Nell on here because of everything she brought to the story, from funny companion and guide to gallant protector and warrior, although she had unknowingly been a warrior the whole time. I really enjoyed the bond she formed with Ichigo before we knew about her past, just a really unassuming character who then secretly turned out to be a former Espada, something that she wasn't even aware of. I loved that whole plotline and what it meant for Hollows and Arancars. It showed that they were more than just enemies, rivals, or monsters. Nell proved that they could be helpful, honorable, and kinder than we were previously shown. The seemingly kind of childish and innocent character turning out to have this really traumatic past is one level of surprising and heart-wrenching, but then only gets even more intriguing when we learn where she used to be in the hierarchy of Hueco Mundo. She was important, and unfortunately was brought down by the internal turmoil between the Espada. Amnesia can sometimes be an overdone story trope, but I thought it was actually handled excellently with Nell. Just such a great reveal and plot twist that made Nell go from a fun side character to something so much more than that. I hope to see more of her soon, because she's great, and I love her friendship with Ichigo so much. She also brings Pesce and Don Tachaka with her, and those are some of my boys, so extra points for that. Nell at number 5. At number 4, I fittingly have Ukiura. Ukiura is a great character that perfectly represented Hollows as we know them. I contemplated putting him higher because I think he has the most fulfilling arc of this entire portion of the story, at least for the Espada. He goes from this ambivalent and distant individual that views most creatures, including himself, as nothing more than trash, to an ambivalent and distant individual that may have finally started to see that maybe not everything is entirely garbage. It's somehow both a very small but absolutely massive bit of character growth all at once, and that's the beauty of it. Sometimes it takes a lot to make a small change, and that small change can completely evolve an outlook on life. The nihilism of Ukiura's existence was challenged, and perhaps even shattered, by simply watching humanity at the most vulnerable of times. It was amazing. It was such a wonderful journey to go on with him. And he was probably the Espada member that we saw the most of overall. His presence was pretty much a constant for a long time, whether it was serving Aizen, guarding a captive Orihime, or trying to show Ichigo that he was nothing. As such, he kind of became a part of the cast that I was very used to in the face of the Arancars in some ways, which was helped by his spectacular design, both his base form, his transformation. He just was so perfectly executed. And his fight with Ichigo is also easily one of the highlights of the series for me as far as fights go. There really hasn't been anything else quite on that level so far. It really upped the stakes and the visuals. It was, and the character changes throughout until you get to that really tragic ending. It was amazing. Ukiura is just a fascinating character that could so easily have fallen into like an edgelord sad boy trope, but instead is so much more than that. Even if the change he undergoes is barely even noticeable until his final fleeting moments. And here we are at number 3. Honestly, I felt a little indifferent to Stark for a while. He seemed chill and cool and a little simple of an archetype, and that was all he seemed for a little bit, but him being simple turned out to be very, very far from the truth. No, Stark is anything but simple. Stark is actually probably all around the best written character in the Espada, I would say. His moments are subtle, where he seems one way but is actually another. He's nonchalant about everything but actually cares a lot. He's a walking paradox, because he's literally kind of torn in two. His relationship with Lillinette and the reveal that they used to be one hollow was incredible, and completely recontextualized every single one of his moments in such fun ways. It was great, and a really, really unique story to have for a character in the series. There really hasn't been another character that's had a situation like that. And when it comes down to it, Stark just is cool. From his personality to his designs to his backstory and how much potential power he has. I was surprised he was number 1 in the Espada until it was proven why he absolutely deserved to be the Primera. He's He's just so cool and wonderful, and like I said, probably the best written character in the group. So why is Stark only at number 3 on my ranking then, right? For me, it's just that there are 2 characters that I clicked with just a little bit more than the rest. At number 2, I have Grimmjow. It's been too long since I've really gotten to talk about Grimmjow, but I still freaking love this guy. For a long time as I went through the arc, he was my favorite Espada, and he still ranks super highly, obviously, since he's number 2. He was fun, and in my opinion, the best rival for Ichigo so far of any characters in Bleach. And yes, that includes my favorite character of Bleach, Kenpachi. Grimmjow works better as a rival than Kenny does. I love Grimmjow's ferocity and his rebellious nature, his defiance, his passion. In some ways, he's so much like Ichigo, which probably helps make it even easier to like him. He's just this extreme version of Ichigo. This natural fighter, this predator, forced to put on a business suit and fall in line, when that's just not his nature. He wants to fight, he wants to get stronger, until he reaches the very top. Grimmjow is a lion that sees himself as a king. He's also easy to root for, even when he's fighting our heroes, because you can see what kind of man Grimmjow is. He isn't fighting for the sake of Aizen. No, he's the only one of the Espada that blatantly tries to disobey him. No, Grimmjow is always fighting for himself and his own dreams, and I respect that. In another world, Grimmjow could easily be the protagonist of this story, a hero fighting against the corruption of the ones that gave him power, and that are trying to keep him down. Mix in his interesting backstory with his gang, some fantastic fights with Ichigo, a killer design, and a fun, unpredictable personality. Grimmjow is great. To be honest, I want him to become an ally or part of the main cast, and besides maybe Nell, I don't think I feel that way about anyone else on here. I'd love to see more. I'd love to see more interactions of him and other characters. He's wonderful, but as great as Grimmjow is, I'm still perpetually loyal to the king himself over a wannabe king like Grimmjow. Yes, I continue to be an unabashed fanboy of Baragan, so to no one's surprise, my number 1 pick for the Espada ranking is King Baragan. This was probably obvious to anyone that watches my videos. I have been called a Baragan fanboy and glazer, and that's all true. This is my guy, my god king, and the coolest of all of the Espada. I had a connection to Baragan from the start. He was who I believed would end up being the number 1 Espada, and I was almost right. In some respects, and I've discovered how highly debated this is, he maybe should be ranked number 1, but that aside, he is ranked number 1 here. I am giving my king his flowers and his proper place on the pedestal in my heart. Conceptually and visually, he is perfectly captured by Kubo, an unrelenting force of nature, a dwindling figure of power of an old world, and I love the aesthetics of a hollow king who uses aging as a weapon. I love his beef with Aizen. I love his final moment when he refuses to die until he can at least try to kill Aizen one last time in his final moments. I just love this guy. Is Baragan the most complex character on this list? No, but I think there's enough there to make him interesting and bolster his already incredible aesthetics. Everything about him just rings true with a lot of my own personal vibes, so even if he's not the most well-written, or has the best fights, or the most interesting backstory, or the most screen time, he's still got it where it counts, and I am loyal to the rightful monarch of Hueco Mundo to the very end. And that's it. My personal ranking of the Espada from Bleach. I'm sure we all have our own lists, so feel free to share them. Seriously, share them. I'd love to see them. But go easy on me. Remember, it's all just personal opinions, but I hope you enjoyed hearing me share mine, as we got to celebrate the Espada and how these characters have all found places in my heart in one way or another. Except for Loopy. Loopy can go to hell. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Please comment, like, subscribe. If you want to support the channel a little bit more, become a member. It would really help a lot. I appreciate it. This was fun. Love these characters. I'm sure this won't be the last time I talk about them. I actually, at 8,000 subscribers, my friend wants me to talk about video game designs for them, apparently. So I'll see those when we hit 8,000 subscribers. So yeah, we'll talk about these guys again. Hope you guys all have a great day. I'll see you later. Take care. Bye.